Sarah Martinez stood outside the commanding officer's door, her heart pounding against her ribs like a caged bird. The corridor of the naval base buzzed with activity as sailors hurried past, but she felt frozen in place. In her hand, she clutched a formal request that could either make or destroy her military career. She had been a Navy communications specialist for 3 years, excelling in every assignment thrown her way. Her superiors praised her quick thinking and unwavering dedication, but Sarah harbored a secret dream that burned brighter with each passing day. She wanted to become a Navy SEAL. The problem was obvious to everyone except Sarah herself. No woman had ever successfully completed SEAL training. The program was designed by men, for men, and had broken countless strong candidates over the decades. The physical demands were legendary. The mental torture was designed to weed out all but the most exceptional warriors. Even among the Navy's elite male athletes, the failure rate hovered around 80%. Sarah knocked on the door and entered when commanded. Commander Richards looked up from his paperwork, his weathered face showing surprise at seeing the petite communications officer standing at attention before his desk. "What can I do for you, Martinez?" he asked, leaning back in his chair. "Sir, I'm requesting permission to attend basic underwater demolition SEAL training," Sarah said, her voice steady, despite the tremor in her hands, as she placed the paperwork on his desk. Commander Richards stared at the documents for a long moment, then looked back at Sarah. His expression shifted from surprise to something approaching amusement, though he tried to hide it behind professional courtesy. "Martinez, you understand what you're asking for here? SEAL training isn't some leadership course or advanced communications program. It's 6 months of the most grueling physical and mental challenges the military has to offer. Grown men, Olympic athletes, guys who could bench press a small car. They walk away broken and defeated." Sarah maintained her rigid posture. "Yes, sir. I understand the requirements and the failure rate. I believe I can succeed." The commander picked up her file and flipped through it. Her record was indeed impressive. Perfect scores on physical fitness tests, consistently high marks in all training programs, and several commendations for excellence under pressure. But those achievements seemed almost quaint when measured against the legendary brutality of SEAL training. "Martinez, I'm going to be frank with you. This isn't about equal opportunity or breaking barriers. SEAL training exists to forge warriors capable of the most dangerous missions on Earth. The failure rate is high because the standards are absolute. There's no participation trophy at the end of Hell Week. I understand that. Sir, do you?" Richard stood and walked to the window, overlooking the training facilities. "Let me paint you a picture. Day 1. You'll be thrown into the Pacific Ocean in full gear before dawn. The water temperature will be around 50 degrees. You'll swim for hours until your lips turn blue and your muscles seize up. Then you'll run 20 miles on soft sand while instructors scream in your face. That's just the warm-up." Sarah remained silent, her jaw set with determination. "During Hell Week, you'll get maybe 4 hours of sleep total across 5 days. You'll carry boat crews on your head until your neck feels like it's going to snap. You'll do thousands of push-ups in the surf as waves crash over your head. You'll be covered in sand that gets into every cut, every blister, every raw spot on your body. Strong men, career soldiers, they ring the bell and quit in droves." The commander turned back to face her. "And that's assuming you even make it to Hell Week. The dropout rate in the first few weeks is astronomical. Why do you think you'd be any different?" 1. Sarah had prepared for this question. But now, facing the reality of what she was asking for, her rehearsed answers felt hollow. Instead, she spoke from her heart. "Sir, I've been underestimated my entire life because of my size and gender. But I've also been proving people wrong just as long. When I was 12, coaches said I was too small for the basketball team. I became team captain. In high school, teachers said I'd never handle advanced physics. I graduated valedictorian. When I enlisted, my recruiter suggested I consider administrative roles. Instead, I mastered communications technology that most sailors struggle with for years." She paused, gathering her thoughts. I'm not asking for special treatment or modified standards. I want to face the same challenges every SEAL candidate faces. I believe my determination, my ability to stay calm under pressure, and my refusal to quit will carry me through what pure physical strength cannot. Commander Richards studied her face carefully. He had seen countless young sailors convinced of their own invincibility. Most learned harsh lessons about their limitations, but there was something different in Sarah's eyes. Not arrogance or naive confidence, but a quiet, unshakable resolve that gave him pause. Martinez, even if I wanted to approve this, which I'm not saying I do, the decision isn't mine alone. This would require approval from Naval Special Warfare Command. They'd want to know why we're sending a communications specialist to the most exclusive training program in the military. Because excellence recognizes excellence, sir. My record speaks for itself. I've never failed to complete an assigned mission or training program. I've exceeded expectations in every role I've been given. I'm asking for the chance to exceed expectations again. 1. The commander sat back down and drummed his fingers on the desk. Sarah's request was unprecedented, but her record was undeniably impressive. More importantly, her demeanor suggested this wasn't a whim or a publicity stunt. This young woman had clearly thought through every aspect of what she was asking for. All right, Martinez, I'll forward your request up the chain of command, but I want you to understand something. If they approve this, and that's a massive if, there will be no special accommodations, no modified physical standards, no media attention or fanfare. You'll be treated like every other candidate, which means most of the instructors will view you as a distraction at best and a liability at worst. Sarah nodded firmly. That's all I ask for, sir. A fair chance. As she left the commander's office, Sarah felt a mixture of exhilaration and terror. She had crossed the point of no return. Within hours, her request would be making its way through the highest levels of naval command. Soon, she would learn whether her dream was possible or if she had just ended her military career with an act of unprecedented audacity. What Sarah didn't know was that her request would spark heated debates in conference rooms across multiple naval facilities. Some officers saw her as a publicity-seeking troublemaker. Others viewed her as a dedicated sailor deserving a chance to prove herself. But everyone agreed on one thing. If Sarah Martinez was serious about SEAL training, she was about to face the greatest challenge of her life. 3 weeks after Sarah submitted her request, the call came. She was folding laundry in her barracks when her phone buzzed with an unknown number. The voice on the other end was crisp and businesslike. Petty Officer Martinez, this is Captain Williams from Naval Special Warfare Command. Your request for SEAL training has been approved. Report to Naval Amphibious Base Coronado next Monday at 0500 hours. Bring only what's on the authorized packing list. Any questions? Sarah's knees nearly buckled. No questions, sir. Thank you, sir. Don't thank me yet, Martinez. You haven't earned anything except the right to try. Most candidates are gone within 2 weeks. Good luck. The line went dead, and Sarah sat on her bunk in stunned silence. She had gotten what she asked for. But now the full weight of that achievement pressed down on her shoulders like a physical force. Monday morning arrived with the brutal punctuality of military precision. Sarah stood among 43 other candidates at Naval Amphibious Base Coronado, watching the sun slowly rise over the Pacific. The other trainees were exactly what she had expected. Tall, muscled men who looked like they could run through walls. Several had competed in college athletics. A few were former Marines or Army Rangers seeking the ultimate military challenge. And then there was Sarah, 5 feet 4 inches tall and weighing barely 130 pounds. The whispers started immediately. Some candidates seemed genuinely curious about her presence. Others made no effort to hide their skepticism. A few offered friendly encouragement, but Sarah could see the doubt in their eyes. They were all thinking the same thing. How long would the experiment last? Instructor Chief Petty Officer Thompson stepped forward, his voice carrying across the beach like a bullhorn. Welcome to Basic Underwater Demolition SEAL Training. Class 347. Over the next 26 weeks, we will determine which of you has what it takes to earn the trident, and which of you will ring that bell over there and quit. He gestured toward a brass bell mounted on a post near the beach. Already, its presence seemed to mock the assembled candidates. The standards here are absolute. We don't care about your college degrees, your athletic records, or your personal sob stories. We care about one thing. Can you perform when everything inside you screams to quit? Most of you will discover the answer is no. Thompson's eyes found Sarah in the group. Some of you might be here for reasons other than becoming a Navy SEAL. Maybe you think this is some kind of social experiment or publicity stunt. Let me be crystal clear. This is not sensitivity training. This is war preparation. If you cannot keep up with your teammates, you will get them killed in combat. We will not lower standards for anyone, regardless of their chromosomes. The first week was a brutal introduction to SEAL culture. Candidates were awakened at 4:30 a.m. for physical training that pushed human endurance to its limits. They ran miles on soft sand that made every step feel like slogging through quicksand. They performed endless calisthenics while instructors screamed corrections and insults. They learned to tie essential knots with numb fingers, while frigid ocean water pounded their bodies. Sarah struggled with some of the purely strength-based exercises. During log carries, where teams of 6 men hefted telephone pole-sized logs above their heads, she had to dig deeper than her teammates to maintain pace. When they crawled under barbed wire through mud, her smaller stature actually proved advantageous, allowing her to move faster than larger candidates who struggled to stay low. But it was during water training that Sarah began to truly distinguish herself. Swimming had always been her strongest physical skill, and in the punishing Pacific surf, that strength became apparent. While other candidates fought against the waves, Sarah moved through them like she belonged there. Her technique was flawless, her endurance remarkable. During a particularly brutal session involving underwater knot tying while breath-holding, Sarah emerged as one of only 7 candidates to complete the exercise successfully. The instructors said nothing, but she caught a few meaningful glances exchanged between them. The psychological pressure was relentless. Instructors seemed to take particular pleasure in singling out Sarah for extra attention. They questioned her motivation, her dedication, her right to be there. They made jokes about her size and suggested she would be better suited for less demanding roles. "Martinez," Chief Thompson bellowed during one particularly grueling morning run, "you're holding back the entire team. Maybe you should ring the bell and go back to playing with radios." Sarah gritted her teeth and increased her pace. Despite the burning in her lungs and legs, behind her, she could hear other candidates struggling just as much. But she knew the instructors would never acknowledge that publicly. After 2 weeks, the class had already lost 12 candidates. Some quit during particularly brutal training sessions. Others were dropped for medical reasons or failure to meet minimum standards. But Sarah remained, adapting to the punishing routine and earning grudging respect from some of her classmates. The real test came during the 3rd week, when candidates faced their first major water evolution. Teams of 6 were required to swim 2 miles in full gear, then complete an underwater obstacle course that tested both skill and courage. The Pacific water temperature hovered around 55 degrees, cold enough to cause muscle cramps and disorientation. Sarah's team consisted of 5 large men who had initially expressed doubt about her inclusion. As they entered the water, she could sense their concern about her ability to keep pace. The swim began badly, with choppy seas and a strong current working against them. Halfway through the evolution, disaster struck. One of her teammates, a former college football player named Rodriguez, began showing signs of severe hypothermia. His stroke became erratic, and he started falling behind the group. In SEAL training, teams succeed or fail together. If Rodriguez couldn't complete the swim, the entire team would face punishment. Without hesitation, Sarah dropped back to Rodriguez's position. Swimming beside him, she began offering coaching and encouragement, helping him maintain proper technique despite his deteriorating condition. When his movements became too uncoordinated to continue effectively, she positioned herself to provide a slipstream, reducing the drag he faced while swimming. The move cost her precious energy, but it allowed Rodriguez to complete the evolution. As the team finally reached shore, all 6 members collapsing in exhaustion on the beach, something had changed. The looks her teammates gave Sarah were no longer skeptical. They were grateful. That evening, as candidates nursed their aches and prepared for the next day's torture, Rodriguez approached Sarah's bunk. "Martinez," he said quietly, "I owe you one. That water was about to beat me. And you didn't have to help." "Yes, I did," Sarah replied simply. "We're a team. Teams don't leave people behind." Word of Sarah's actions during the water evolution spread through the candidate barracks. Slowly, attitudes began to shift. The woman who had been seen as a curiosity or distraction was earning recognition as a genuine teammate, but the instructors seemed unimpressed by this development. If anything, they intensified their focus on Sarah. As if determined to find her breaking point, Chief Thompson made it clear that her survival thus far proved nothing about her ultimate suitability for the SEALs. "Martinez," he shouted during one particularly brutal morning inspection. "Just because you can swim doesn't mean you can fight. Just because you helped one teammate doesn't mean you won't get others killed when the bullets start flying." Sarah stood at attention, absorbing the verbal assault without reaction. But inside, she felt a growing confidence. She had proven she belonged in the water. She had proven she would sacrifice for her teammates. Now she needed to prove she could endure whatever else the instructors threw at her. The fourth week of training brought the most challenging evolution yet, a simulated combat mission that would test every skill they had learned. As Sarah prepared her gear for the exercise, she noticed something that filled her with quiet pride. Her teammates no longer questioned her presence on their team. They trusted her to do her job. The real crucible still lay ahead, but Sarah Martinez had survived the initial shock of SEAL training. More importantly, she had begun to earn something more valuable than respect: acceptance as a warrior worthy of the trident. Hell Week arrived with the inevitability of a hurricane. For 5 days and 4 nights, SEAL candidates would face continuous physical and mental torture, designed to break all but the most determined warriors. Sleep would be limited to perhaps 4 hours total. Food would be scarce. The ocean would become both enemy and testing ground. 28 candidates remained from the original class of 44. Sarah had watched strong men ring the bell and walk away from their dreams. But she had endured. Now came the ultimate test. The week began at midnight Sunday with a coordinated assault of explosions, machine gun fire, and shouting instructors. Candidates were roused from their bunks and immediately thrown into the surf for the first of countless ocean evolutions. The water temperature had dropped to 48 degrees, cold enough to cause immediate shock to the nervous system. "Welcome to Hell Week," Chief Thompson screamed over the sound of crashing waves. "This is where we separate the warriors from the wannabes. Some of you think you're tough. Some of you think you deserve to be here. You're about to find out if you're right." The first 24 hours were a blur of constant motion. Boat crews raced across the beach carrying rubber rafts above their heads. Teams crawled through mud under live machine gun fire during simulated combat exercises. Candidates performed endless calisthenics in the surf, while instructors hurled insults in freezing water. Sarah's boat crew started strong, working together with the precision they had developed over weeks of training. But as exhaustion set in and the cold began affecting judgment, cracks started to show. By Tuesday morning, 2 more candidates had rung the bell, unable to continue. The real test came during the famous log carries. Telephone pole-sized logs weighing over 200 pounds had to be carried by teams of 6 across miles of soft sand. For Sarah's teammates, it was a test of raw strength and endurance. For Sarah, it became something more, a test of will against physics itself. Her smaller stature meant she could not shoulder as much weight as her teammates. But rather than let this become a liability, Sarah found other ways to contribute. She became the team's navigator, keeping them on course when exhaustion clouded their thinking. She maintained morale with constant encouragement. Most importantly, she refused to let fatigue show on her face, becoming an inspiration for teammates who were struggling. "Martinez." Chief Thompson appeared beside her team during one particularly brutal log carry. "You're slowing down your team. Maybe it's time to ring that bell." Sarah looked up at the instructor, her face streaked with sand and sweat, her uniform soaked through with salt water. "Negative, Chief. This team doesn't quit." Behind her, She heard Rodriguez grunt his agreement. "We got this, Chief. Martinez ain't going nowhere." The instructor studied her face for a long moment, then moved on without another word. Wednesday brought the underwater knot-tying evolution that had broken countless candidates over the years. Teams were required to dive to the bottom of a 50-foot pool and tie increasingly complex knots while holding their breath. The exercise tested not just physical ability, but mental composure under life-threatening stress. Sarah had always been comfortable underwater, but Hell Week had pushed her body to its limits. Her lung capacity was reduced from exhaustion, and her fingers were numb from constant cold exposure. As she descended for her third dive, she wondered if her body would respond when she needed it most. The knot required was a bowline, a fundamental sailor's knot that should have been routine. But underwater, with burning lungs and numb fingers, even simple tasks became monumentally difficult. Sarah could see other candidates struggling around her, some abandoning their attempts to return to the surface for air. She focused on her breathing meditation techniques, slowing her heart rate and conserving oxygen. Her fingers worked methodically through the familiar motions of the knot, even as her vision began to narrow from oxygen deprivation. When she finally tied off the final loop, she realized she had been underwater for nearly 2 minutes. Surfacing to find she was the first candidate to complete the evolution, Sarah was amazed to see Chief Thompson nodding approvingly from the pool deck. For the first time since training began, she had earned visible recognition from her tormentors. But Hell Week saved its cruelest test for last. Thursday night brought the surf, torture, evolution, where candidates were required to lock arms and sit in the frigid surf for hours while waves crashed over their heads. The exercise was designed to induce hypothermia and test mental resilience when physical discomfort became unbearable. As teams sat in the pounding surf, Sarah felt the cold seeping into her bones. Her smaller body mass made her more vulnerable to heat loss, and she could feel her core temperature dropping dangerously. Around her, she could hear teammates beginning to lose coherence as hypothermia affected their thinking. This was the moment Sarah had feared most. Her physical limitations were on full display, and there was no technique or strategy that could compensate for basic biology. The cold was going to affect her more severely than her larger teammates, and everyone knew it. But as her body temperature dropped and her thinking became cloudy, Sarah made a conscious decision that would define her entire military career. Instead of focusing on her own discomfort, she began monitoring her teammates. She started a cadence, keeping everyone mentally engaged. She checked on team members who seemed to be losing consciousness. She became their anchor to awareness when the cold threatened to steal their minds. "Rodriguez," she called out when she noticed his responses becoming sluggish. "Tell me about your girl back home." "What's her name?" "Maria," Rodriguez mumbled through chattering teeth. "What's she studying in college? Come on, talk to me." Sarah kept her team talking and thinking for 3 hours in the surf. When instructors finally called them out of the water, she was the last candidate standing, helping support teammates who could barely walk. Chief Thompson appeared beside her as medics checked candidates for hypothermia. "Martinez, how you feeling?" "Ready for the next evolution, Chief," Sarah replied, though her voice shook uncontrollably from cold. "That was pretty impressive back there, keeping your team coherent." Sarah looked up at him in surprise. It was the first compliment any instructor had given her during the entire training cycle. "Chief, someone had to watch out for them. They've been watching out for me for weeks." Friday morning brought the final evolution of Hell Week, a 10-mile team run followed by a written examination. Candidates who had survived nearly 5 days of torture now had to prove they could still think clearly and perform under pressure. Sarah's team crossed the finish line as the sun broke over the Pacific horizon. 22 candidates had survived Hell Week, but Sarah had done more than survive. She had excelled in ways that no one had anticipated. The real shock came later that afternoon, when final scores were posted. Sarah had achieved the highest combined score in Class 347 history. Her swimming times were record-breaking. Her navigation accuracy was perfect. Her leadership scores during team evolutions were off the charts. Chief Thompson called her aside after the scores were announced. "Martinez, I've got to tell you something. When you first showed up here, I thought you were going to be a distraction at best, a safety hazard at worst." Sarah nodded, unsurprised by the admission. But you just posted the highest Hell Week scores I've seen in 15 years of instruction. Your swimming times broke records set by Olympic athletes. Your leadership under stress was textbook perfect. And your refusal to quit inspired teammates who were ready to ring the bell. He paused, studying her face carefully. You didn't just complete Hell Week, Martinez. You dominated it. The remaining phases of SEAL training brought new challenges, but Sarah faced each one with growing confidence. She mastered combat diving, excelled in weapons training, and showed remarkable aptitude for the strategic thinking required in special operations. When graduation day arrived 6 months later, Sarah Martinez stood among 8 survivors from the original class of 44. As she received her trident pin, symbolizing her acceptance into the elite SEAL community, she thought back to that nervous young communications specialist who had knocked on Commander Richard's door with an impossible request. The SEALs had laughed when she asked to try. They had questioned her motivation, her physical ability, and her right to be there. But Sarah Martinez had answered every question with performance that spoke louder than words. She had not just completed SEAL training, she had redefined what was possible, setting records that would inspire future generations of warriors, and proving that excellence recognizes no boundaries except those we place on ourselves. As she walked away from the graduation ceremony, wearing the trident she had earned through months of unimaginable trial, Sarah Martinez had become more than the first woman to complete SEAL training. She had become a legend, a warrior whose story would be told for generations as proof that determination and heart could overcome any obstacle.